Hey everyone, it's Joe Beethoven, and yes, I know I've been gone for a long time. I totally understand if you're mad at me, or if you have no idea who I am. That could also be the case. Either way, I'm back now. I'm here. I'm doing a new video. It seemed time since I finally got the chance to see this. Yep, that's right. I finally saw Uncharted, starring Tom Holland as some kid who claims to be Nathan Drake, and Mark Wahlberg as some guy that's nothing like Victor Sullivan. Yep, all my fears were confirmed and more after seeing this film, and if you saw the thumbnail, you know that I think this movie sucks. Seriously, guys, I did not like it at all. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but I just needed to vent real quick. And I will warn you, this is going to be spoiler-filled. I'm going to have spoilers. The movie's been out for a bit. A lot of people have already seen it. And it's not like I get that much notoriety. So anyone who watches my channel has probably already seen this movie. But if you haven't, you have been forewarned. I will be going at least a little in-depth into why this movie is terrible on so many levels. Once again, spoiling the fact that I don't like this movie. You don't know my rating yet, though. I might have a unique rating system for this film. Or I might not, but I think I do. We'll see. Anyway, I'm back, and there's no better way to come back than by reviewing this piece of trash film that happens to have the same name as my favorite video game series of all time, Uncharted. So, Uncharted starts, appropriately enough, with our hero, Nathan Drake, hanging outside of a cargo plane. Where have we seen this before? He's climbing up the cargo crates and commits multiple crimes against the laws of physics. This doesn't make any sense. This actually makes the scene in Uncharted 3 look way more realistic. I have no idea how the heck he's pulling this stuff off, because you can't. You can't do these kinds of jumps. You can't climb that fast and just appear behind a guy out of nowhere. It's a really dumb version of an amazing gameplay sequence. And then we pointlessly flash back to when Nate was a little kid with his brother Sam. What's so funny is that this kid he doesn't look that much younger than Tom Holland. I actually thought this movie was going to be about young Nathan Drake, but no. Tom Holland is meant to just be Nathan Drake. Tom Holland looks like a kid. They only got him, obviously, because he's a famous actor. I have nothing against the guy, but this movie proved to me that he was actually worse than I was expecting. But once again, getting ahead of myself. Anyway, we flash back. Little Sam, little Nate, hilariously fail at stealing a map. Sam's being thrown out of the orphanage. He chooses to run away. And instead of growing up together on the streets like they do after Uncharted 4's flashbacks, Nate never sees Sam again. Nate grows up without Sam and never sees him again. Why do they make this change to the lore? I don't know. Why change the history of the characters in this significant a way? I don't know. All I know is that it's a worse choice than what they had in the games, and they just refused to work with it. Already off to a bad start. And then we have Nathan Drake, actually Tom Holland using the pseudonym Nathan Drake, an alias, because it's not Nathan Drake. I'll keep getting into that. I insist that this guy is nothing like him, is tending a bar in New York City and stealing jewelry from girls. Wow. Very noble. This is such a great introduction. Stealing jewelry from a girl. Not even like, someone mean or someone selfish. Just a random girl who actually seems kind of nice. Wow, great introduction to this character. And then we meet Sullivan, who literally, after 2 seconds of talking to Drake, immediately tells him about this big score he has and invites him to come along. Cutting out actually some of the slightly funny conversation that they had in the trailers and just getting straight to the point, because this movie needs to be less than 2 hours long so it can play in as many theaters as possible. Remind you of anything else? Anyway, immediately, there is no chemistry between this version of these characters. Like, what? They just seem like two jerks interacting about something that neither of them actually cares that much about. It's just sad, because neither of them is slightly representative of the amazing characters they claim to be adaptations of. Anyway, Nate says no, then later on meets up with Sully to get something back that he had stolen from someone else that Sully then stole from him. Great setup, whatever. They talk for a bit about Magellan's treasure. You saw that in the trailer, but it's actually not Magellan's treasure. It's actually the treasure of his crew and his actual captain, because Magellan died or whatever, something like that. And then Nate says no again. I'm not going with you. Even though Sully says that they could find Sam if they work together, Nate says no because Sam's been dead to him for a long time. And then Nate goes back to his apartment, looks at some postcards and pictures of Sam, 30 seconds later calls Sully and says, I'm in. The most rushed and unconvincing setup I've ever seen. I think this all happens in the span of about 10 minutes. You don't buy any of it. The characters are immediately not that likable. It doesn't work. I'm definitely getting bogged down in the specifics here. There was a lot I didn't like about this movie. Anyway, from here on out, they have their globe-trotting adventure. They go to the auction house, which you've seen in the trailers. A scene completely lifted from Uncharted 4. They go to different locations. They solve puzzles. Blah, blah, blah. They try to do the Uncharted stuff. But the main problem is that Sully is terrible. I actually thought that Mark Wahlberg was miscast in the role. But honestly, he actually gives a really good performance of this character who's not Victor Sullivan. Seriously, Mark Wahlberg is not the problem here. They didn't write Victor Sullivan. And this is, I guess, one of the more major spoilers. Sully actually betrays Nate in the film. He gets what he wants from the auction house and leaves Nate to get arrested and just bails on him. If you've played Uncharted 3, you know that Sully was willing to sacrifice everything as soon as he met Nate. He wanted to take care of this kid. Not so with this movie. In fact, Sully's arc over the course of the film is learning how to value human life, specifically Nate's life, over treasure. That's his arc in the movie. And it's just as sad and pathetic as it sounds. That's not Victor Sullivan. Period. And honestly, Nate's not Nate, as I've said before. This is how I described it. My sister actually texted me while I was watching the movie and asked me how the elf was doing. That's what she calls Tom Holland, the elf. And this is how I described him. Peter Parker meets unintelligent teenage girl. That's actually how I would describe him. There is no distinction between this character and Peter Parker, and there is no similarity between this character and Nathan Drake. There's a scene where he's in this death trap with Chloe, and instead of trying to figure out how to get out, he just goes, Sully, 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 save me, Sully, save me, save me. He just screams. Doesn't try and figure anything out. Chloe has to calm him down. I know the idea is that he's young, but Nate was always cool as a cucumber under pressure. He always was. And there's nothing like that. And he's not even that smart. He gets tricked. He gets outsmarted multiple times in the movie. One of the best aspects of Nate's character is that he's always the smartest guy in the room. Not so with Peter Parker meets unintelligent teenage girl. I do not like this version of the character, and that's being generous by calling him a version of the character. It's not Nathan Drake. Now, I touched on her briefly. Chloe's actually not bad. That's actually one of the aspects of the movie I liked. I think she's a lot more two-dimensional than the character we have in the games. She's a lot more basic, and the implication that she somehow has known Sully for a long time, even though she's actually Nate's peer, and Sully's significantly older than both of them, it just doesn't add up for me. It's the same thing with Sully's relationship with the quote-unquote villain of the movie, who's really pathetic, Braddock. Apparently they were a thing, and I think Mark Wahlberg is 25 years older than the actress, and it just doesn't work at all. Also, Antonio Banderas does a great job with what little he's given to do, because, spoiler alert, he is gotten rid of before the climax of the film and replaced with Braddock, who, actually, appropriately enough, is a really weak villain, because at first Uncharted didn't have very good villains. So I will say they got that right. Braddock is super boring, uninteresting as a character, no fun, and of course is a super strong, powerful female who can destroy anybody, a la Nadine. Very similar to Nadine. I don't have anything against Nadine. I just feel like they, instead of creating a character, just made someone that was identical to Nadine with a different name. They didn't create their own character. If you want a strong female, sure, but make her well-rounded. Make her have a motivation. This character does not have one other than money. She just wants money and kills Antonio Banderas to get that money. It just doesn't work for me. She's not at all engaging as a character. Anyway, the story of the film, which instead of focusing on what makes Uncharted great, which is the amazing characters who interact so well with each other, the story instead focuses on characters consistently backstabbing each other, not trusting each other, and getting in their own way because they won't trust each other. Terrible writing, terrible plotting, terrible characters throughout the film. The action is okay, but it's nowhere near as good as it could have been. The Uncharted games are so filled with material for them to use, and honestly, they don't make good use of any of it. There's a scene where Nate is using his bartending skills to fight guys, skills that he never had in the Uncharted games. I know they do different things, that's fine, but it just doesn't look that cool. It just looks kind of like, wow, he's flipping bottles and then smacking them in the face with them. Why do you have to flip it? Why don't you just go straight to smacking it? Anyway, Point is, action is nowhere near as good as it was in the games, but at least the CGI looks pretty good. They clearly spent a lot of money on it, and it shows. I don't mind how it looks. It's just not Uncharted. Through and through, it's not Uncharted. You can have globe-trotting adventures in anything. What sets Uncharted apart is that the characters matter more than the globe-trotting, matter more than the treasure, matter more than the adventure. And this movie does not care about that. This movie is Indiana Jones light, actually. Indiana Jones light times 1,000. It's pathetic. It's an attempt to cash grab with a recognizable brand, a brand that deserves respect and honor, and they just decided instead they would make Indiana Jones light times 1,000. It's not worth it. Honestly, the way I described it coming out is that this film actually managed to disappoint me, and I had zero expectations from this movie. Even as a film, not an Uncharted film, a film, it's got a terrible plot, terrible writing, terrible pacing, and a climax that just kind of happens. Yes, it looks cool, but the setup makes no sense because suddenly Sully and Nate reconcile because they had like one sort of moment where Sully kind of apologizes and suddenly they're quipping and smiling and having all this fun when just a second ago they hated each other. Well, at least Nate really hated Sully. It's so poorly done. All the character development, all the arcs. It's an example of bad filmmaking that also happens to be a terrible adaptation of my favorite video game franchise. So it failed in both ways. I think it is overall a terrible film that you can only enjoy because occasionally it looks good and occasionally there's a funny line here or there. I think overall it is a complete fail on everything it tries to do. The post-credit scene, which you should stay for, is easily the best part of the movie. It's the only scene that feels anything like Uncharted, so stay for that. If there's a sequel, hopefully they go with that. They go with that vibe, because maybe they could make a good movie. They don't even use the theme song that much, and the moment they do, oh my gosh, I can't believe I almost forgot to talk about this. Okay. The moment where they really use the theme song, it's this moment where Nate gets his holster and gets a gun. They manipulate you with the theme song. You think for a second, wow, he's going to do something awesome. He goes out onto the ship, attempts to shoot one guy, misses, and then immediately loses his gun. That's right, Nate never successfully shoots anybody in this movie. I know they want to make him less kill happy, I get it, it's a movie, not a video game. But Nate should shoot somebody. Okay, just once. Even if it's like an injury, at least let him hit the guy with the bullet. I don't know why they thought they couldn't have him shoot anybody, but it happened, and it's not good. Also, I lied earlier. Easily the best scene in the movie is Nolan North's brief cameo. I cried. That moment makes me so happy. I love him. He deserves all the love in the world for bringing this character to life. Tom Holland deserves 0 props. The director, the writer, none of them deserve any props for calling this Uncharted. They should have called it anything else and changed all of the names. I would have said it was an Uncharted ripoff. I still wouldn't have liked it, but at least it wouldn't have desecrated my favorite video game franchise of all time. Either don't make a sequel to this movie or do a billion times better, because as it stands, this movie is a complete fail. So, I said I would have a special rating system for this movie, and I do, because I want to be as objective as possible. So I'm going to rate it as an Uncharted movie, and just as a movie, okay? So that you could see there is an Uncharted fan in me who wants to hate on this movie probably a little bit more than it deserves. So, Uncharted rating. As an Uncharted movie, this is a 1 out of 10. It is a complete failure. Just because you have a guy who jumps around and occasionally punches somebody and solves puzzles by accident, really, does not mean you have an Uncharted movie. It fails in every single way that counts. The storytelling is weak. The characters are nothing like their counterparts in the video games. You don't care about anybody involved. You don't care about any of the events that take place. It just feels like a fake Indiana Jones movie. As a result, as an Uncharted movie, it is a 1 out of 10. Now, objectively, just as a movie without any of my Uncharted bias, there are some things that work for this movie. As I said earlier, the effects are totally solid. It actually looks pretty good a lot of the time. Some of the dialogue is funny every now and then. Chloe is pretty good. And Mark Wahlberg, because he's not actually playing Victor Sullivan, does a pretty good job in the movie. He plays a character with the same name, but is not him at all. As a movie by itself, it has enough fine to okay to slightly maybe good moments. None great, none that are actually good, some that you could say are almost good. It has enough of these moments for me to give it a 4 out of 10. I still think it's really bad, even without my Uncharted bias. I think it's poorly paced, poorly written, poorly acted on a lot of fronts, and has such rushed and unbelievable character arcs that you don't buy anything that pretty much happens between the characters. And by the end, you just feel kind of empty because really you didn't connect with anything that happened in the film. If you hadn't played the games, you would have no love for these characters. I don't understand how anyone could like this movie who's in either camp, who's played Uncharted or who hasn't played Uncharted. I think either way, it fails. So it gets a 1 out of 10 on the Uncharted scale and a 4 out of 10 on the just plain movie scale. All right, that was actually my first movie review ever, and I'm really glad to be back. I know I was gone for a while. Life happens, okay? Stuff happens. I've been really busy, and I'm happy to be back at the channel. I've been watching some of my other YouTube friends. They kept going, and I'm so happy that they kept it up. I'm trying to catch up with you guys again. I hope you're doing great. And look forward to more content coming out soon. I'm going to do an Uncharted ranking and share my thoughts on the franchise as a whole. It is my favorite video game franchise probably ever, and I can't wait to talk about it. I'm working on playing through Crossfire X, which is actually sort of a new Remedy game, but also not really. But because it is kind of a new Remedy game, I am reviewing it, and if it's enough of a Remedy game, I might even add it to the ranking. Who knows? We'll see what happens. I'm also working on a Final Fantasy project. It involves Final Fantasy 13, which I'm actually able to start now since I've completed the game recently, and I can give you my full thoughts on it. I won't tell you exactly what angle I'm taking, but I'm excited to do it. And I know I've talked about this a lot, but I am still planning to do my Alan Wake project, which involves what I think should happen in Alan Wake 2, how I would write Alan Wake 2, essentially. And I hope to get that done soon. So there's a lot of stuff coming. I'm hoping that I'm really back on the horse. We will see what happens. All right, that's all for now. God bless you guys. I'll catchphrase you later, and this mantra keeps me going. Alan Wake 2 is coming. And this mantra makes me sad. Uncharted the movie sucks. Bye!